Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to cover a few logistics, and then we'll get started. So I want to let you know that this is being video recorded and live streamed to our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to watch that later, it is at Indivisible Crestone Baca Grande on YouTube, and there's also a link on our flyers up front. Please silence your cell phones. And we will have a Q&A towards the end of the town hall after our panelists speak, so if you could hold your questions until then. And then if you are watching online and you need Spanish subtitles, you can go on YouTube to the lower right-hand corner, click closed captioning, the CC button, and then the little gear icon for settings. Auto-translate in Spanish. I'll read that in Spanish as well. Para aquellos que necesitan traducción al español, puede activar los subtítulos en la parte inferior derecha de su video de YouTube y luego ir a la configuración, el icono de ajustes en la parte inferior derecha y seleccionar traducción automática y subtítulos al español. So, again, I just want to welcome you all. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Janine Tenbrook, and I am the team lead for the Saguache County Immigration Protection Team. We are a subgroup of Colorado immigration protection teams, and our purpose as immigration protection teams is to send a clear and strong message to our immigrant neighbors that we see you, we care about you, you are not alone, and also to counter a lot of the myths that are in the media about our immigrant communities, and finally to pressure elected officials to develop more humane approaches to immigration policy. We do have flyers up front if you're interested in joining or supporting us. There are teams all over Colorado, and ours is Saguache County. I would like to take a moment to thank everyone who has made this event today possible, in particular, Indivisible, Colorado Immigration Protection Teams, Dawn and Ruthie, who are offering this lovely venue for us. The County Commissioner of Saguache County, Eliza Marin, who's agreed to moderate for us. The San Luis Valley Immigrant Resource Center, and to our local immigration protection team, especially to Jane and Val and Ann, who have done so much to help set this up today. I also want to note that this event is a fundraiser, so we will be holding the fundraiser towards the end after our panelists speak, and we have Q&A for the San Luis Valley Immigrant Resource Center. The mission of the SLVIRC is to connect and empower immigrants with resources to achieve legal documentation, fulfill their economic needs, and integrate into the community. SLVIRC provides crucial and unparalleled services in the San Luis Valley, and I'll be talking more about them towards the end when we have our fundraiser. So before I introduce our moderator and we move on to our panel, I'd like to invite the members of the Crestone Baca Grande Indivisible group who will be sharing a few real stories of Coloradan immigrants who have been disappeared or targeted to go ahead and come up. In many ways, it's a dark moment in American history right now. Across this country and in Colorado, people, some with legal status, others still navigating a broken immigration system, are being detained, disappeared, or deported without warning. These actions by ICE have been carried out without due process, which is a constitutional right granted everyone in the US, regardless of citizenship status. Some names may already be familiar to you because they've been in national news, but we wanted to give you a few names and stories of real people in Colorado being impacted by the escalation in this unethical immigration crackdown. The resources for these stories is the immigrationhub.shorthandstories.com.
Suleiman Niang was a youth soccer coach and father who was detained by customs officials and held without explanation while returning home from visiting family in Gambia. Suleiman is a green card holder who has lived in the US for 25 years. His wife back home and their infant son were shocked to learn of his detention. A customs officer later told her on the phone that the system flagged a 2009 marijuana possession charge which had been dismissed. He was later released, but has since caused others with legal status to rethink their travels abroad.
Two unnamed Venezuelan men with the initials DBU, aged 32, and RMM, aged 25, were detained by ICE and then granted a temporary reprieve by a federal judge who barred their deportation amid concerns that they could be wrongly sent to Saguache, a Salvadorian prison notorious for abuse. Despite fleeing gang violence and having no ties to the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, they were accused based on their tattoos and their presence at a party. Of the 238 migrants flown from the U.S. to El Salvador under the Aliens Enemies Act, about 12 have been identified from Colorado. 3 such detainees include Jose Eduardo Moran Garcia, Alejandro Jerez Hernandez, and Nixon Perez. Trump administration officials made the claim that they have ties to Tren de Aragua, but their cases were devoid of any due process or documentation. They were given no prior notice or opportunity to review the allegations against them. They remain in that prison.
The number of international students at Colorado universities being impacted by visa revocations has nearly doubled since initial actions taken by the Trump administration. Colorado State University has confirmed at least 16 international students from the Fort Collins campus have had their visas revoked in recent weeks. An additional 22 students from the University of Colorado system have been confirmed to have also lost their visas. The federal government can revoke a visa based on a criminal record and can take action against those on F1 student visas for otherwise relatively minor offenses. However, any encounter with law enforcement does not give the government the basis to terminate someone's status.
Jeanette Vizguera is a longtime Colorado resident, having lived here since 1997 when she fled violence against her and her husband in Mexico City. She's the mother of 4 children who are U.S. citizens. Jeanette is a well-known immigrant rights activist who has been outspoken about immigration reform. Time magazine featured her as one of the 100 most influential people in 2017. In March, she was arrested by ICE at her workplace and is in a detention facility in Aurora. Denver Mayor Mike Johnson said the arrest of Vizguera is not about safety. This is a Putin-style persecution of political dissidents.
So I'd just like to invite a brief moment of silence for the stories that you just heard, the human beings behind those stories, for the many, many unnamed who are similarly impacted right now, and also for the immigrants and protesters in LA who are being treated violently by the US government at this time. Thank you. Throughout our history, immigrants have embodied the best of America. Some of you may be immigrants yourselves, and all of us who are not indigenous to this land come from a lineage of immigrants. Today, they are being terrorized, targeted, detained, and disappeared, often by masked and anonymous agents in growing numbers. Later in the town hall, we will offer you some actions you can take to help advocate for our immigrant neighbors. Now, I would like to present to you our moderator for the rest of the town hall, Liza Marin. Liza is a lifelong advocate for social justice, democracy, and the well-being of rural communities in the San Luis Valley. A founder of the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition, she helped launch the Rio Grande Farm Park, an incubator farm and community space where immigrant families have grown food, built businesses, and found belonging. With a degree in Spanish and decades of grassroots organizing, Liza has forged deep relationships across cultures, always centering equity and empowerment. She also helped launch SC Seed, the Saguache County Sustainable Environment and Economic Development, and now serves as Saguache County Commissioner. Liza is secretary of the San Luis Valley chapter of the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union and continues to champion food sovereignty, land stewardship, and inclusive governance. She believes in the power of coming together across backgrounds and beliefs to build a more just, inclusive, and resilient future for all.
Thank you, everybody. It's really great to be here, and I want to thank you all for coming for this important conversation on immigration. Yes, my name is Liza Marin, and I have the honor of serving as your moderator today. And I do want to be clear that I am not here representing Saguache County. I am here as an ally to the immigrant community on my own. So just want to make that clear. We begin by acknowledging that we gather on the ancestral lands of the Dene and the Ute and many other indigenous nations that stewarded this place for generations, and so I hope that we can carry forward their legacy of respect for the earth and for each other today. I also want to again thank Society Hall for providing this welcoming space, and deep gratitude to the Saguache County Immigrant Protection Team and the Crestone Baca Grande Indivisible for organizing today's event and bringing us together in a spirit of justice, dignity, and safety. I'd like to introduce a few people in our audience. I will start with Senator Cleve Simpson. Representative Matthew Martinez. And then San Luis Valley Representative for Senator Hickenlooper, Patrick Ortiz. Have I missed any elected officials in the room today that would like to be recognized? Okay. We want to honor the immigrant families of the San Luis Valley who enrich our communities with their culture, their love, and their presence. They are vital to the strength and the future of this region. This town hall is a chance to learn and to stand up for the values that make this valley so strong: justice, inclusion, democracy, and public safety. We just want to ask you that you hold your questions and comments to the end so that we can hear from our panelists, and we'll give about 15 to 20 minutes for each of our panelists, and then we will go into question and answer. So with that said, I'm going to introduce our first panelist, and coming all the way from Denver, so we are so thankful that you did that for us. This is Stephanie Izaguirre. She first became interested in immigration law in 2001 while working for the U.S. Consulate in Rio de Janeiro. She graduated from law school at the University of Denver in 2005 and passed the North Carolina bar. While in law school, Stephanie was an intern at the Rocky Mountain Immigrant Advocacy Network and spent a semester working as part of the law school's immigration law clinic representing asylum clients. From there, Stephanie worked as an adjudications officer for the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services in San Juan, Puerto Rico. After leaving USCIS and working with a private law firm in San Juan, Stephanie returned to Colorado Springs, passed the Colorado bar, and opened the Izaguirre Law Firm in October of 2010. And I just want to take a quick moment to also introduce her compadre who's in the audience somewhere. There he is, Francisco Pizarro, and he is the outreach person for her law firm, so he may like to network with some of you before this day is over. So go ahead, Stephanie. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here. I have about 6 generations of, well, basically my family has almost no immigration history in the most recent 6 generations. And I always think it's kind of interesting that I ended up in this field. But I credit my parents for kind of first making me interested in immigration. When I was about 6 or 7, my family hosted a refugee family from Laos. And we were told, oh, they've been living in a refugee camp. Like, they're not going to know what a toilet is. They're not going to know what a washing machine is. Like, you're going to have to show them everything. And mom and dad and the 2 sons showed up, and I was very excited to begin teaching them English at the age of 6 or whatever. But, you know, it turned out that their dad had worked in a hotel, like a 4 Seasons or something like that. And so obviously they knew what sinks were and refrigerators were and toilets were. And, you know, when I think back, and I just think that I think we know where other people are coming from, or we know other people's experiences. And that's really not a good place to start. You know, we need to understand that we are not always going to know everybody else's background, where they come from, why they're here. And so probably my absolute favorite thing about being an immigration attorney is the chance to hear people's stories and hear about what brought them here. I've never heard a boring immigration story. And I had a meeting with the Colorado Springs mayor, who is an immigrant, just about 2 weeks ago. And he said, yeah, you know, people almost never ask my story. And so I just want to encourage everybody to be open to the idea that the people that you meet that are not from here all have unique and individual stories. And it's easy to talk about kind of immigrants as a group, but I want to really encourage us to remember that that is really not correct. I also want to let you all know that when I had been living in Puerto Rico. I moved back to Colorado in 2009. I knew nobody, and I took a pro bono case for 2 Guatemalan teenagers who lived here in Alamosa. And we were seeking special immigrant juvenile status for them, which was going to allow them to get a green card. I really had no idea what I was doing. I'd never done that kind of case before. I didn't have a Colorado bar license, and so I did all the research, and I prepared all the paperwork, and I gave it to my client, and I was like, hey, I'll sit in the back in the courtroom, but you're gonna have to talk to the judge about this. And the judge was Martin Gonzalez, who's since retired, but he was like, who are you and why are you sitting back there? And I said, oh, Your Honor, like, I don't have a Colorado bar license. But he's like, but why are you here? And I said, well, I'm trying to help these people get this guardianship case so that they can get green cards for these kids. And he was like, well, come on up here and tell me what you need. And so that was my very first experience with taking private clients here in Colorado. And so I always have kind of considered Alamosa to be sort of where I got my start, even though I live really far from here. So when Trump won the election that night, I saw the little New York Times predictor go kind of over in the direction that he was going to win, and I immediately just felt stress and fear for everything that was going to come for all the people that I've worked so closely with. And I decided that my response was going to be to try to expand the reach of my law firm and expand the services that we provide to Spanish-speaking individuals or immigrant individuals in Colorado. And so one of the reasons why I'm so happy to come down here is because my law firm is working on expanding our reach. And so we want to be present in your community. We want to consider this as one of the communities that we represent. And so after today, if anyone has any questions or there's any kind of events or anything that you would like us to participate in, you're welcome to speak to either of us, and we'll be happy to go ahead and support your community in any way that we can. I do have a number of clients here already, and so we come to Alamosa somewhat frequently. So enough about me. I would like to talk to you guys a little bit about kind of what we as the immigration advocate or the immigration lawyer community have been focusing on since January. Number one, I have done more than ever a significant number of Know Your Rights presentations, which is a little bit of a challenge because I'm not actually a constitutional attorney. But letting people know that the Constitution protects all individuals who are in the United States, regardless of their citizenship status. Letting people know that ICE agents, in theory, could possibly have a warrant signed by a judge which allows them to enter into a home, but in general, if an ICE agent has an arrest warrant, it's not signed by a judge, and it doesn't give them the right to enter someone's home. So advising people that in general, they don't have to open the door for ICE agents, they don't have to let them in. Talking to people about kind of traffic stops and how you may be required to identify yourself, but you don't have to answer additional questions. One of the tactics that we've seen ICE use is they'll wear vests that say police on them, and so it can be very confusing for people because they think they're being pulled over by a police officer when in reality it's an ICE agent. And so just talking to people about Know Your Rights presentations, and I will say again, if there's a need in the community for Know Your Rights presentations, even though it's not necessarily my forte, it's something that we'd be more than happy to provide to the community. I've also spent a lot of time talking about the concept of due process, and this is a little frightening to me as an American citizen because I've always considered due process to be the absolute bedrock of who we are as Americans and what it means to live in the United States of America. You get due process. And how many Supreme Court decisions have there been over the years, you know, sort of bending over backwards to protect people's due process rights, sometimes even to the point where it's like, oh, you know, do we really need to do that? Like, you know, this person probably ought to have been in jail, but you know, the police violated their due process rights. So we're going to let them go because we respect the concept of due process. We have such great respect for that concept that we're going to let people that are probably guilty go because of how important due process is. One of the questions on the naturalization exam, if you want to become a United States citizen, one of the questions actually is, what is the rule of law? And the answer in the book from USCIS is essentially that no one is above the law, that the law applies to everyone. And I think due process is under attack in this country. I think we've seen, I actually think due process is under attack for all Americans, not just immigrants. I just think that immigrants are legally vulnerable, and so it's an easy place to start, essentially. But I have found myself advising clients, you know, the law says this. That doesn't necessarily mean that's going to happen anymore. You may need to have a lawyer represent you, not just in immigration court or criminal court, but potentially federal court, because the federal government may violate your due process rights. One example, and I hesitate to talk about this too much because I don't have all the information, but there is I'll get back to due process in a second, but one of the other things the Trump administration has done has expanded the concept of expedited removal. So in a normal deportation process, the person is advised of the charges against them. That's one of the fundamental parts of due process. And they're told that they need to come back at a certain date and time and be prepared to deal with their case, essentially. And normally they have time to go find a lawyer and investigate and see if there's some kind of defense to deportation that they might be eligible for. And pretty much everybody is eligible for that kind of deportation process unless they've possibly been deported before. However, there is a second kind of deportation called expedited removal. So removal is the technical term that we use now for deportation. Expedited removal is just kind of a fast deportation. And until January, it was always implemented just at the border, within like 100 miles of the border, for people who had been in the United States less than 2 years. And it's a very fast process. A lot of times people don't even realize it's happened to them. There's no judge. There's not really an opportunity to present your side of the story. You're just given a paper that says you've been given an expedited removal, and you're put on a plane or taken to the border and sent back to your country. Expedited removal happens, or used to happen, mostly with Mexican citizens, because the border is right there, so it's very easy to just take them back to Mexico. It was more difficult to do expedited removal for people from other countries, but over the years we've expanded expedited removal. But in January, the Trump administration announced that they were going to expand expedited removal to include anyone who's been in the United States less than 2 years, regardless of where they're found in the country. And so that created a lot of fear and a lot of panic, because there were a lot of people who believed that they had already been they'd gone through the initial immigration process at the border. They believed that they were going to be given time to present their defense and fight their case. And then about a month ago, there was a new case from the Board of Immigration Appeals, which allowed ICE to essentially cancel someone's more expansive, more due process, more rights deportation process, and immediately put them into the expedited removal process. And so that's people who've come in the country illegally, who've been here less than 10 years, but there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of people in our Colorado communities who have been working on their immigration process, who have been working on their defense, who are following the rules. But last week, ICE was doing this new thing where the ICE attorney would go into the courtroom, tell the judge they wanted to dismiss the charges, and then once the judge dismissed the regular deportation process, the person would walk out the door, and ICE would be waiting for them and would take them into custody and put them into this expedited removal process. And so, I mean, I don't really understand the legal justification for how this is happening, except that there was this new case. But I'm sure many of you have heard about the Egyptian immigrant who attacked people in Boulder. Okay, obviously that was a deplorable act. I'm not defending his actions in any way. But his family was here in the United States. They entered with visas, so they entered legally. They applied for asylum. At least this is what I've read in the paper. They applied for asylum. They were waiting their asylum interview opportunity. And ICE showed up at their house in the middle of the night and took them away to a family detention center in Texas. And my understanding is that the wife and the children are detained in that detention center and were about to be sort of deported through this expedited removal process, except that an attorney filed an action with them for federal court and stopped their deportation. So the concern that I have is, as I said, expedited removal is supposed to be for people who entered the country illegally, who've been here less than 2 years. And this family number one, they're not, I mean, we don't know if perhaps they did know what their father was planning. I don't know, but I don't think anyone has made that accusation. And so I think you have, children and his wife who are most likely innocent, who were about to be subject to an expedited removal that they shouldn't have been subject to because they entered with a visa and they've been here more than 2 years. So the message that I want to give allies of the immigrant community is that our most basic concept of what it means to be an American, I think, is under attack. And it may not be me or my family today, but once due process kind of starts to slide, once it starts to go, I don't know that there's a lot to stop it from continuing in that direction. And I think the next group that we look at are, U.S. citizens born to immigrant parents, right? That's a group that's already been targeted. Nothing has happened so far, but that's a group that's been targeted. And I think President Trump was talking about sending American people who were supposed to be serving time in prison to El Salvador to sort of serve their time in El Salvadoran prison. So again, I don't think that's going to happen, but I also didn't think that, this expedited removal process would happen the way it's happened. And so I don't mean to be an alarmist, but if you're asking me kind of what you can do, I think that you can try to educate your community. You can be a friendly face. You can be supportive of the immigrants in your community. But you can also realize that the focus that is on immigrants right now is not necessarily limited to them only, and I worry that it will expand to all of us. And so I think we need to talk to our elected officials. We need to make sure that they fight back, and I appreciate the representation that we have here from the elected officials that we have here, because sometimes, it just feels like nobody cares. And so it's good to know that there are people that care. I totally have no idea how long I'm supposed to be talking.
Yeah, you have 20 minutes.
Okay.
And you have about 5 minutes left.
Okay, great, thank you. Sorry, I get on my immigration soapbox and I could just talk forever. So the last thing that I just wanted to mention, because this is something that happened here in your community here, there are a large number of teens that have come to the United States in the last several years, and many of them are eligible for what's called special immigrant juvenile status. It's a way to get a green card for kids under 21 who've been abused, abandoned, or neglected by one or both of their parents. And that's kind of the case that I mentioned with Judge Gonzalez at the very beginning. My office does probably more of those cases in Southern Colorado than anybody else that I know. I also work as a guardian ad litem, so I do a lot of work with children, immigrant children, but just non-immigrant children as well. So a few weeks ago, we got a call from someone here in the community that ICE had showed up at their house asking about one of their teens who lived in the house, who was a client of ours. And initially, we were worried that they were coming to detain this teen, who's a high school student here, and the family member who had talked to the ICE agent, was very startled to have them show up at her door, and wasn't really sure why they were there. They were agents from HSI, which stands for Homeland Security Investigations. They're a part of ICE. And in the past, they were the part of ICE that dealt with trafficking victims, domestic violence. They were the most pro-immigrant part of ICE, I would say. But since January, they've been tasked to do all kinds of things which are really not pro-immigrant. And so there were, I believe, two families. One was clients of mine, the other one not clients of mine, but kind of heard about it. And I think they truly were here just to check on these kids and do a welfare check. I think there's a less scary way to do a welfare check. For one thing, they could have just called my office and asked, where these people were, and we could have put them in touch with whoever. But I'll just, let you know that that is something that's happened here in the community. I think it's happened in other places in Colorado as well. And so I always caution people, even if the person at the door says they're here to help or they want to check on your kid and make sure they're okay, I'm not sure it's a good idea to open the door other than maybe to get kind of basic contact information. So that was kind of the one recent story that I've had from kind of the Alamosa area of ICE being involved down here. So are we doing questions at the end?
We are.
Okay, great. So thank you very much. That's about everything that I wanted to cover, and I'll be happy to answer your questions at the end.
So thank you so much, Stephanie, for that great perspective from an attorney that's serving even people here in the San Luis Valley. So that's really good to hear from you. We are going to move on to a local panelist, Gus Bastrachea, who so glad you're here today, and I've known Gus for a while. He's currently the chair of the San Luis Valley Agricultural Coalition and has held that position for about 9 years. We weren't actually sure, or longer, maybe. He has a special place in his heart for the agricultural workers of the San Luis Valley. From June 2013 to 2023, Gus served as the outreach worker for the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. And during this time, he met and worked with many individuals active in agriculture. He's now employed with San Luis Valley Area Health Education, what's the C stand for? Center. AHEC, known as AHEC, full-time as the lead promotor with Mi Salud y Mi Familia program, and works part-time for CU Anschutz on several health projects active in the San Luis Valley. Gus says he has a wonderful wife of almost 19 years and a 9-year-old daughter who keeps him very busy. So Gus, come on up and give him a warm welcome.
Hi, I do meetings and facilitation of group discussions on Zoom, and so to have you here in person is a bit intimidating, so bear with me. So thank you all for being here. I very much appreciate your attention and spending your Sunday afternoon with us. As Liza was saying, I worked with the agricultural workers of the San Luis Valley for about 10 years, and agriculture is what brought me to the San Luis Valley. Basically, my first impression of the valley, I had never been here in the valley, aside from when I was driving through to Four Corners, and it was 10 o'clock at night, and I blinked and I missed Monte Vista. So I've lived in Monte Vista for over 11 years now, and working with the Department of Labor and Employment has really opened my eyes to the reality of how our food and how our immigrants and how our agricultural workers have an impact on daily living here in the United States and markedly in the San Luis Valley. With the work I do with the Agricultural Coalition, I've been the chair for, I don't know, since we reorganized. Shortly after I started with the Department of Labor, they asked me to reconvene the Agricultural Coalition because it's so important to the well-being and for the support of the immigrant community, given that the agriculture is one of the largest employers of the San Luis Valley. It's very important that we remain vigilant in making sure that the workers in agriculture and the supporting communities feel that they can welcome and they can be part of the daily living of these agricultural families. Once upon a time, there used to be an influx, a large group of the migrant workers coming following the agricultural harvest throughout the region. As time has gone by, there are a couple different reasons that we are seeing less migrant workers come through the valley. One being from personal observation, the migrant workers that used to come through they are, so to speak, aging out. At a certain time, you want to retire, you want to rest, you want to sit still, you want to have a home, and not for your home to be constant migration through the different regions of the area. Number two is we don't have the younger generation replacing the older workers. And so as a result, that group that would migrate gets smaller and smaller. Another reason from observation is that we as a society have done such a great job of encouraging individuals to receive an education, to have their high school degree, to go on to trade schools, to go on and develop a trade, or to go to college and get a degree. As a result, those individuals who might have gone into agriculture have not, and so the numbers get smaller and smaller in terms of how many migrant workers are coming through. And so I speak to that to give you an idea of how important it is to have an immigrant and migrant community who come into the valley and do the work that is backbreaking, that is very difficult, that is not very secure. If we have a hailstorm go through and wipe out 3, 4, 5 different fields in the San Luis Valley, then perhaps that lettuce or those potatoes or those carrots or collard greens cannot be harvested because Mother Nature needs time to recuperate. As a result, those individuals cannot work. And when you cannot work, you don't get paid. And so there have been security measures put into place to make sure that the workers are being cared for, whether or not the fields are ready for them to harvest. Another subsection of the immigrant community and the agricultural needs in the San Luis Valley are the H-2A program. And if you're not familiar with the H-2A program, that is a federal program that allows employers to seek and to bring workers from other countries to do work that Americans are not, or domestic workers are not able or willing or trained to provide. As a result, the H-2A program brings workers from countries such as Peru, Mexico, Ecuador, South Africa, to do the work that is needed at the different times of harvests. With the H-2A program, there are guarantees of housing, transport, and income that the employer is charged with holding the tab. The workers that come through the H-2A program are here to work. They don't have to worry about where they're going to live. They don't have to worry about transportation to and from the fields. They are receiving an adequate wage. And I say that to let you know that any and all domestic workers who are interested in doing that work of the H-2A program have first dibs. You and those individuals can have those jobs. That you'll receive the same guarantees. And so the immigrant community is very important to the Valley, and I won't ask for a show of hands, but I know most everyone in here on some level is an immigrant to the United States, unless you are Native American, or if the border crossed you. Perhaps you were a Mexican resident, and way back when Texas and the southern part of the United States was annexed, or all the way out to California. In that case, the border crossed you. You were a resident, you didn't move, you didn't cross a border. The border was crossing you, and you were annexed into the United States. So the impression I get is that immigrants are everywhere, and they are important to the continued success of the United States and of we as the San Luis Valley community. It's also important to remember that the work that is done by the immigrants in the San Luis Valley, as well as throughout the nation, is such that there are things that we as Americans, as domestic workers, whether you be a resident, a citizen, or somewhere in between, there is some work that we don't want to do, that we feel that we don't have to do, that we have a degree, or we have prestige, or we have experience, or we have whatever you want to call that you might have. The immigrant and the migrant communities do work that some of us cannot and will not do. And so it's very important that as migrants and immigrants, they can feel welcome and supported here in the San Luis Valley. There is the constant fear of deportation. There is the constant fear of ICE. There is also the fear of, where is my next meal going to come from? There is the fear of, where am I going to live? Are my children safe? Am I receiving adequate health care? All of those things weigh heavy on the mind of any individual, and the added stress of immigration and security in the San Luis Valley weighs very heavily. And I can tell you that as I am a first-generation Cuban American, my family came over in 60 and 62, fleeing communism from Castro's Cuba. They arrived in the United States with the equivalent of about $5. They were not able to bring money. They were not able to bring any valuables. They were shaking everybody down at the airport. Thankfully, they were able to arrive on some of the last freedom flights to South Florida. The law of the socialist turned communist government was that no valuables could leave the country of Cuba. And so my paternal grandfather was a real estate lawyer. He had been a real estate lawyer for between 20 and 25 years. He was established. He had security. And so from one day to the next, that security was taken from him and his family. My maternal grandfather and maternal grandmother were upper middle class, so to speak, in Havana. And he was a salesman, distributor for the H. Upman and Coiba cigar company. And as a result of the changes in government views, everything was taken away. So from one day to the next, last week, my grandfather would have been a real estate lawyer. This week, he's washing dishes at Miami Beach Hotel. And that's how quickly wealth and security can be taken away from individuals. And so I speak to that to let you know that I am an immigrant. I migrated to the United States, to Colorado in 1996. And so I'm viewed as American. I'm a citizen. But at which point will this administration or an administration to follow view as recent immigrants, just one generation, removed from coming to the United States? At which point is that going to be taken away? And so with that, I want to make sure that individuals feel welcome. The immigrants coming to the United States are not just humans, but they are useful, they are valued, they are cherished here in the San Luis Valley, and we want to make sure that they can feel welcome, that there are resources and there is availability to make sure that the security, health, education is guaranteed for those individuals.
So you have
a little time. Oops. Hello. So you have a little time left, and so I might just pose a question to you here. So, what are you hearing from families that they need most here in the San Luis Valley in these times?
The feeling of security, how secure, how welcome families are in the San Luis Valley is ever present. Many media outlets are along the Front Range, and so there are stories of the Front Range visits and raids. And what's going on in the San Luis Valley can, in an instant, become the stories you hear about along the Front Range media outlets. With the double-edged sword that is technology, we in the San Luis Valley will know from 1 second to another where there has been government visits, and by government I mean ICE, and I mean other detainment agents. So there is the constant fear of detainment. There is a constant fear of children coming home to an empty house. And so I'll inject here a bit that I saw earlier today on social media. It was a quote from Anne Frank, and I'm sure you know who Anne Frank is. She lived through the internment and the concentration camps of Germany. She said, the fear of children coming home to an empty house, and that's not a direct quote, but the general idea was that the instability and the impending fear of coming home to an empty house was enough to rattle everyone. And it's a slippery slope when they start to detain individuals who are of a different color, of a different race, and at this point, detaining individuals who are of a different immigration status.
Thank you. And maybe just with a minute or so answer, so what has that done to the trust in the community? I mean, what do you see as far as the trust factor with our institutions and more here?
The immigrant community has varying degrees of trust with government entities, but it's definitely been intensified recently with a new administration and the new anti-immigrant sentiment that has been felt throughout the state. There are individuals who won't go to work for fear of possible detainment. There are children who will not go to school, who will not be allowed to go to school by their parents or their guardians because there is the chance of detainment. And so that fear weighs very heavily on the residents of the San Luis Valley.
Thank you, Gus, and I think you might have a new career standing in front of people because I think you did an awesome job. So,
thank you very much.
All right, so along the same lines of talking with a promotora who's deep in community, we are really happy to welcome Anita Rodriguez. And Anita was born in Pueblo, Colorado, one of 9 children. Her father was from Mexico and her mother was from New Mexico. In her childhood, her entire family traveled state to state as migrant farm workers. In that experience, Anita developed a passion for advocating for people in need, especially migrant workers, agricultural workers, and immigrants. She became a promotora with Las Promotoras de San Luis Valley at their inception in 2020 to support, educate, and advocate for the immigrant community related to COVID at that time. She also advocated for and helped support the passage of Senate Bill 21087, also known as the Agricultural Workers' Rights Bill, which significantly expanded protections for agricultural workers, including those related to overtime and safety. Anita lives in Center, Colorado, where she continues her important work as a promotora with Project Protect Food Systems. And she had a little more on here, but I'm going to let her tell that story. All right, so yeah, please.
Good afternoon. As Project Protect Food System, we are statewide. We are a statewide network led by Project Protect Food System, a nonprofit organization based out of Denver. We cover 5 regions: Southwest, Western Slopes, North, East Denver, and San Luis Valley. Right now, our team, Promotora San Luis Valley, is formed as a regional director, 4 bilingual promotoras, 1 emergency responder, and myself. We have staff that speak English, Spanish, and Cancobal. We rely on the community to help us translate other Mayan dialects when needed. Trust in the community is very important. We are all together. I live in Center, so that's my area of focus. But when we need help, we will all partner together to get extra help. Who are promotoras? Promotoras are known community leaders. We act like social workers, culture navigators. Our mission is to guide, lead, educate, and take resources to ag workers. What is our scope of work and how we can help? We help with anything we can think of, from food insecurities, running the community pantry by the airport that is open to the San Luis Valley due to our partnership with ARMSER, Rocky Mountain SER, to taking resources to ag workers at their job sites. We distribute education material, food, clothing, relief funds, and any important resources available to ag community. We also advocate for. In the terms of immigration, we have been fully involved in Knowing Our Rights campaign. So far, we have distributed close to 2,000 Know Your Rights cards, which are these, over the San Luis Valley. Immigration is hard and unvulnerable topic for many. Once in effect, a family member is affected, and the entire family and the community. We are ready to support families that may be affected by rules and potential deportations. We have and continue to work closely with Immigrant Resource Center, Legal Aid, and Service from Denver. We as a network are available to support in any way needed as things unfold. As I mentioned, we have bilingual staff that speak English, Spanish, and Cancobal. We have built strong relationship with the community to mobilize and find resources needed. We started this work in response of COVID-19 pandemic 5 years ago in September 2020. We have gained significant amount of trust and experience. We have seen the community regarding information, Facebook rumors that ICE is in the valley. That's very challenging that we have no way to stop it once it starts. We advise not to share anything that is not confirmed. If ICE, U.S. Immigration Resource Customs Enforcement, and also known as La Migra, show up, what can we do? There is not much we can do. It is important that we know our rights and establish that the tool ever needed, remain silent, do not resist, do not open the door unless my ICE has a warrant. As promotoras, in the case there is a raid or someone in our community is deported, we are ready to support affected families. Moral support were very crucial. Picking up. Okay, as of this, like when we heard that ICE was in Center, there was somebody called me from Mata Vista saying that ICE was in one of the warehouses. So I'm like, does anybody take pictures? They're like, no, but my husband's wife or whatever, he was able to get away. So I'm like, okay, I'm the manager at Rainbow Thrift Store and Center. So at that moment, I closed the store. My daughter and I were driving around through different warehouses looking to see if we saw ICE anywhere. And then we had other people going through other roads. So we were just like trying to look through. And I went to one of the warehouses that they said that ICE had been. I walked in, there was nobody there. It was like I had to walk all the way up to the main offices. And I talked to one of the managers up there, and I said, I have a question for you. She's like, yes. I said, has ICE been in here today? She's like, not that I know of. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I said, let me tell you a little bit about what I do, who I am. So then I explained to her who I was, and she was like, okay, now I feel more comfortable talking to you. She said, All I know, she said, is that everybody just like took off. Everybody, we just started seeing in the cameras. She goes, everybody was jumping in their cars. Everybody left. She goes, nobody said anything. They just took off. So I'm like, but did you see anybody? She's like, no, honestly, I didn't see anything. She goes, because I have access to the cameras. I saw her cameras, and it's right in the parking lot. So I'm like, okay. So then I, right away, I contacted other people that we know in the valley, letting them know, no, we did not see anything. I had, like I said, we had other people around, driving around. They're like, no, we didn't see anything either. So that's why it's important, not to, and then our family, our friends, they started hearing, because people started spreading the word, and that's how rumors get bigger. And I had families wanting to go pick up their kids from school because they were afraid that ICE was going to go to the schools. And we're like, if your kid is in school, that is the safest place your child could be, is at the school. Because our schools are not going to let ICE, unless they're going, come in. Unless they're going for a specific person, that's the only way that they're allowed to go in. And not even in the school, they're going to be escorted out to the main office, and then that's it. But yes, we had people wanting to go pick up their kids, and families saying that they weren't going to go to work the next day because they were afraid. Like Gus was saying, it is very, the people get really scared when they hear ICE. In Center, we have a lot of people that are undocumented. We try not to use the word illegal because they're, it's undocumented. So that's what it's scary for our families, our friends that we have. And I don't want anybody to feel that, because like Liza was saying, I am a migrant. I was a migrant. I worked all my life as a migrant. It is hard. It is hard to see people work still the same as like I did. When I was out working in the fields, 10, 12-hour days, and I was maybe as old as he is. I think I started when I was like 8 years old working in the fields, and I don't regret it, because that's what that's what I think that's the person that I become today. Like to help others and don't like injustice. So yes, that's why I do what I do, because I don't want anybody to feel like just because they are here undocumented that they're not worth anything. I don't want them to feel like if their child is at school and ICE is around, that they'd have to go pick them up because they're afraid. I don't like that. So we'll see. It says also known, all agricultures are also known that all ag workers are not undocumented. We have workers that are American migrant workers, which means they migrate from a state, like Cuz was saying, from another state or another country to work for a period of time, or are H-2A workers that are contracted to come from another for a period of time. Another tip, instead of using, like I was saying, illegal, use the word undocumented instead. With me starting to work with promotoras, Luis Murillo is the one that started our initial group back during COVID. I didn't even know, honestly. Luis he got a group of parents together from our school and a parent group that we have. He said, you want to help spread the word to people about COVID? We're like, okay, we'll do it. We don't even know what it is, but okay, let's do it. Here we are with our face shields and our gloves and hand sanitizers and our KN95 masks, going, from house to house to our community, to our immigrant families' houses and stuff, and spreading the word, giving information out about what it is, because in Mexico, when you get a positive, they're understanding that positive is a good thing. So when they got their test and they did positive, oh, okay, we're good. We're good. No. That's not good, right? So that's what we came in, and that's where we started, saying no. If you get a positive, that means no, it's not good. stay home. But a lot of people didn't say anything because of that, because they didn't want to have to not work, because they have to support their families. And we had a couple families, I think, in center that, we had a family like of 20-something that all got COVID at the same time. They all all of them had COVID, so that was one of the families that we visited. And after that, the lady that we went to go visit, her name was Maria. She became a promotora with us also, and her husband were along with us side by side when we were doing our visits. After they got out of COVID, after it was safe for them to come out. So yes, with this being said, like during the time of pandemic and stuff, there is a camp, a H2A camp in Center, that during that time when we met all these H2A guys, they had to wear a certain hat on their head, a certain color. I didn't know why until later on. I found out that it's because they wanted to distinguish, their employees wanted for them to distinguish, the people from our town would know that they were from out of town, that they're not, community members, which I don't know why they would do that, but I mean, come on, they're there to work. Our H2A people, guys, are very hard workers. They're responsible. I also, now with being the manager at the thrift store, they're in there all the time. They come to buy clothes for themselves, for their families, whatever they could get, whatever they're trying to make a living, buy a little bit of things here and there, because they can't take that much back either because it costs them a lot. So it's very difficult for them, but I'm there trying to help them. And we still, during that time, we would make events for them at one of the warehouses, the abandoned warehouse that we had. We would make events for them, and we would go out. And when we would see a couple guys out in the street or whatever, we're going to have an event. We're going to be giving this. We're going to be doing this. And at a certain time, we're going to have food. Lisa was one of our people that would also help us out with bringing donations in for our H2A guys. And it was really nice to see the amount of people that would get together to get out of where they were at, because they were afraid. They were not allowed to get, to associate with the community. They just went in, go buy whatever they were going to buy, and had to leave, go back into the camp. But once, so when we had our events and stuff, it was really nice to get them all together. Not all of them, because some of them were, like I said, they were afraid. But it is very important to me to help all our immigrants, help all our H2A, our ag workers. That's my passion. I like, not even them. Everybody. I get people in there, that need something, that need a pair of clothing, that need whatever, and I'm there. I'm there to help, and that's who I am. That's what I enjoy. And yeah, that's what I do.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you so much for the important work that you're doing in Center, and thanks for sharing your story with us. Means a lot. And so this next panelist is very near and dear to my heart. Luis Murillo and I were in the same cohort at Adams State over 2 decades ago. And I also had a son at Mountain Valley School who was expelled and for behavioral issues, and he was going to go to a very unsavory juvenile education scenario that I was not happy about. And when Luis was the principal at Skoglund Middle School and Center, he agreed to take my son, and he spent 2 years in Center and was successful, went back to Mountain Valley School and graduated with the class of 2020, outside all by himself because it was COVID and we were doing one student at a time. But I just will always be grateful for that. So thank you so much, and I'm going to read your actual bio. So Dr. Luis Murillo is the Assistant Superintendent of the Alamosa School District, serving a large Latinx immigration population from Mexico and Guatemala. Born in Guadalajara, Mexico, Luis immigrated to Oxnard, California at age 12. He was guided by his father's belief in the power of education. Luis became the first in his family to attend college. After playing football at Ventura College, he transferred to Adams State University, earning degrees in Spanish and psychology, followed by a master's in counseling education. Luis began his career at Ortega Middle School, later serving as principal at Skoglund Middle School and Center. A passionate advocate for equity and access, Luis now leads with heart and vision at both district and state levels. He is president-elect of COALAS, which he will tell us what that is, and an SLA Cohort 9 graduate. Deeply rooted in the San Luis Valley, Luis aspires to become a superintendent committed to championing the dreams and potential of every student. So please give a warm welcome to Luis Murillo.
Okay, should be good. I'm an educator, and research about the brain and learning says that kids should have a movement break about every 3 to 5 minutes, and adults about 20. We've been sitting for a while, so I'm going to invite everyone to stand up, stretch around before we continue. Let me sit back down if you're ready. I have the honor to serve as Assistant Superintendent at Alamosa School District. I just completed my 4th year, and our goal is to love all students. Our goal is to create an environment where students feel included, where they feel like they belong, and our goal is to give all students the tools to have choice after graduation. That is what we do. In that, there is a lot of things that go into that, such as teaching math, teaching students how to read and write, but also we serve a population of 2,022 students who have a lot of needs. We also serve a population of students whose families qualify for free and reduced lunch at about an 80% rate. We also serve about 13 to 14% of our student population who are learning English as a second language. And about 70% of our families identify as Hispanic or Latino. That's what we know of our students. Liza invited me to talk about the impact that the immigration laws or changes to the law, I don't know. I'm an educator, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm gonna talk about what we're seeing has on schools. Post-pandemic, we've really been focused on attendance. During the pandemic, our families and our students learned about several things. One of them was about choice of learning. So since the pandemic, we've worked really, really hard on ensuring that all of our students make it to school as much as they can. So we established a campaign, it's called the Everyday Matters campaign, and there is a lot that goes behind that because we know that if we can get our kids to school, we can educate them. Our goal was to move from 92% average daily attendance to about 96%, which is where we were right before the pandemic. So through that lens, we've been able to track sort of what's happening with our students because again, we don't ask for any sort of legal residency. We don't know any of the stuff on paper. We know some of our students and families that choose to let our parent liaisons know, otherwise we wouldn't know. We've seen a steady increase of our students attending our schools, and that is great. We want to celebrate. When the new administration came on board, we actually saw a slight decrease, but we couldn't tell if it was because of the new administration and the fear amongst our families or because there was flu going around in our schools. So I don't have actual data, but that happened. We got into work, we established a whole family engagement team whose job is to create a bridge between schools and communities and to ensure that we're hearing the stories of families and make sure that we are getting rid of any obstacles that families or kids might have to attending school. Through that lens, we've learned about 3 different stories, which I'm going to elevate, because this isn't about me, it's about our families that I want to make sure that you guys know. The story that our attorney told, the way it came to us, our high school principal let us know that she had 2 students who reported to her that ICE officials were at his house. Those 2 students were at school that day. So I called the Immigrant Resource Center and I said, are you hearing any of this? Is this true? Is this not true? What should we do? And of course, Flora said, direct them to me. Students were safe at school the whole day. They learned, they were fed, they were loved, they went back home. The following day, they showed our principal video from the Ring camera, and it was 4 officials, 2 marked, 2 unmarked, and they indeed knocked on the door. And what we know is that they were there to do a welfare check. That's what we know. I'm happy to report that those students have been attending school. They were at school until the end of the school year, so as far as we know, they are still in our community. Another story that I want to elevate is the story that happened at our 3-5 building. As I mentioned, we have parent liaisons, and we have different levels of thresholds when we reach out to homes and families when our students are missing. In the state of Colorado, a student is considered to be truant after they missed 10% of the total allotted number of days. So we have some students who've met that threshold, and when that happens, we call, we conduct home visits, we try to do everything we can to find out what is going on, to see if we can help. We had a student who had been gone for 2 weeks, and we could not get a hold of anyone, neither the parents or, of course, the student. We kept sending letters home, and we were unlucky in getting any contact with the family. Finally, we were able to get the mom to come in after a home visit by a parent liaison, and she came in with documentation about a deportation order. And what she said is, I've been keeping my daughter home because I don't know when the last day will be when I get to see her, and I don't want to lose out on that chance of having her with me. Our parent liaison, was very shaken, and the whole system, our school counselors and our principal, because again, we're about loving students, we're about educating students, we're about making sure they feel seen and heard. So that story happened, and of course we were able to direct that family to get some help and support from the Immigrant Resource Center. And again, that student, through the end of the school year, is still with us. As far as impact, the impact that this whole thing has had on students is fear. And it's not so much fear for themselves. Our students are resilient. Our community is very resilient. It's the fear that they will go home and their parents are not there. And honestly, we have no tools to combat that other than to continue to love them when we have them, educate them, because that's one thing that is happening, but the reality is that our students come with several different traumas and things that we try to overcome, and this is one more. This is one more thing that we're dealing with. Early on, we had a student at the alternative education site who was very worried about what I just mentioned. She was worried that she would come home and her parents wouldn't be there. At that time, I offered to sit down with the student to at least empathize and hear more about her fears. And she sees me as a high official at the school district, so she refused to speak to me, and I understood that. The last thing that I want to share, towards the end of the school year, we get Title III dollars, which are meant to educate students regarding learning a second language so that they reach a level of proficiency. Through those title dollars, we put together a celebration. There was a culminating celebration of the students' efforts, and we call it Lectura en mi familia, or reading at home, because we try to foster reading. And it truly is a celebration where we invite all of our students who are learning English as a second language, and we invite their families, and we provide some gift certificates, we provide some plaques, and we also celebrate their efforts. We had a big planning committee that planned for several months We ended up having 663 participants, and this is not just parents and students, it really is our community members who have continually shown up for us. The morning of the event, there was a rumor that ICE was going to show our school event, show up, and there was going to be a raid. Of course, that didn't happen. It created fear, and we worked our hardest to combat that through the information that we had. And of course, I picked up my phone and I called Chief Dingfelder and I said, "This is what I'm hearing. Do you know anything about this?" And he said, "No, I'm unaware. Would you like police presence at your event, or would that add any fuel to the fire?" And my response was, "You guys are walking through our schools every other day, so this wouldn't be any different. So you're welcome to come be with us," and they did. So for us, the bottom line is it's created fear. I'm unaware of any one of our students or parents of our students that has actually been deported. I might be wrong. I realize that I sit at the district office, but we are a small community. I would know if that happened, but it has created lots of fear. And when you look at the grand scheme of things, I mean, our kids have to battle hunger, our kids have to battle poverty, our kids have to battle whatever is going on at home. I mean, as I look around, I see neighbors. We all live in Alamosa, and we all know the stories of some of our students. They have to overcome all those things in order to be able to learn so that they can have choice after graduation. What this has caused, it has caused another layer for our students and our community members to have to work through in order to gain access to the promise of public education for all. So as I get to stand up here, I wanted to elevate those stories to create some empathy. And as a community member, continue to support our school district, our students, and our parents, because we all truly just want to give all students the best chance they can to, again, have choice after high school graduation, whatever that be. It could be the workforce, it could be military, it could be going on to college. We just want to ensure that everyone has choice so that they don't have to be tracked to a certain job after high school. So I got it. I'll take questions if you have any, or I can go back and sit down.
So we have a few more minutes. Whoops. We have a few more minutes with your time segment, so I just might ask you maybe a hopeful question. Mm-hmm. What gives you hope for our immigrant community and families and the community here in the San Luis Valley?
Yeah. Among superintendents, when there was talk about ICE officials entering schools, amongst the superintendents groups in Colorado, and there was several conversations about what do we do? How do we protect our students? What can we do through our elected officials, or what can we do as a collaborative? And I, as an immigrant myself, who's benefited from the American dream and the pathway to legal citizenship, I said, our communities are resilient. We've been for years. This, unfortunately, is not new. There's been raids in our community in the past. I've been a resident here for 23 years, and I recall some other raids happening at Calvillos or in centers. So, unfortunately, this isn't new. But on the flip side of that, if you're an immigrant or if you're a person of color, this is part of your burden. This is part of what you live with. This is part of what you grow up with. So my message to them was, I am less worried about officials entering our schools. I'm more worried about the everyday fear or what could happen to their neighbors, their little classmates that are hearing the messaging on social media, that are hearing the messaging on television, that could one day turn and say, "You're not like me anymore, so we can't play together." So my hope is that we could continue to all be one community and see each other as humans, and that as far as schools, that we can all come together to continue to support public schools so that we can give all of our students a chance at choice and becoming productive members of whichever community they choose to live in.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I was going to say, Dr. Murillo is a giant in the field of education. We're so thankful to have him, and literally and physically. And I didn't get to tell his football story of his bio either. But we'd like to take this time to turn the mic over to the folks in the audience to ask any questions you might have of these great panelists. And Jane Brolsma is going to come up here and take the mic into the audience. So if you would please speak into the mic if you have a question, and then as you answer the question, would you please speak into the mic, step up to the mic, because we are streaming and also recording this. And if you're not comfortable with that, please don't take the mic.
Thank you. My name is Gaetano. I'm a naturalized citizen who worries about being detained and disappeared. I have a legal question and then a request afterwards if I can see you in private. My legal question is, what would be the usefulness of applying something called the Bivens action, where you can sue a federal officer for violating your constitutional rights?
I'll just rotate here. I do not have a good answer for you. So a Bivens action is something that you can do in federal court, but it's not specifically immigration related, and so I don't think I can really answer your question. I know there are some situations in which that yes, you as a private citizen can sue the federal government, but other than that, I don't think I can give you a good answer, and I'm sorry. But I'd be more than happy to talk to you about anything else when we're done.
Yeah, afterwards. Thank you.
Sure.
Earlier today, I saw a video about a fake ICE person holding a young girl at gunpoint while he forced her father into a van. And it was very obvious he was fake because his equipment was subpar and it just did not look right. So my question is, as members of the community, if we see somebody pretending to be ICE, what can we do if, if we're not sure that the police will help? What can we do? Because this is basically kidnapping.
Yeah. So, I think the right answer is call the police, because that is a kidnapping, and that's or the sheriff, wherever you're at. We have here in Colorado something called the Colorado Rapid Response Network, or CORN. I'm not sure if you all have heard of that. It's a Facebook group. It's connected with the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. And the way they work is people call in rumors or concerns, sightings of maybe ICE activity, and then the CORN group sends out trained confirmers, normally U.S. citizens, so they're not at risk of being detained themselves. They send out confirmers to try to document as much as possible of that situation. And so I think if you have reason to know that this person is not actual law enforcement, I think you would call the police. I think that if you believe that it is a law enforcement action or you're not sure, the Colorado Rapid Response Network would be an organization that you could call. And I don't have their contact info on me, but they have a Facebook group. And they go by CORN, or CORRN, or the Colorado Rapid Response Network. And I think they're statewide.
And if anybody else has an answer to the question as well, feel free to step up.
And we've been hoping to actually invite CORN here to the San Luis Valley to do a confirmer training, so that if there is interest in the community, particularly for citizens, I'd be happy to work on setting that up.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. First is for Stephanie. When you were talking about the expedited deportation. It sounded like due process is not a part of that. Is that correct? That if you're
So the way the statute is written is it is expedited removal is supposed to apply only to people who have relatively minimal, I'm just going to say stake, for lack of a better word, a relatively minimal stake in being here in the United States, because they're people who, by definition, came in without, they didn't come in with a visa. They have been here less than 2 years, and previously they were relatively close to the border. And so kind of what Congress said is, okay, these are people who have less of an interest in being in the United States because they haven't been here very long, or they're still at the border. And so we're going to give them less rights to defend themselves because they have this lesser stake here in the country. And so, I mean, as an immigration advocate, I don't like the expedited removal statute. It's very frustrating. Also, people often don't realize it's happened to them. So you sort of have to question how much due process they got if they don't even realize that they've been deported. But I believe that portion of the law has never been successfully challenged or overturned in the Supreme Court. So Congress thought there was sufficient due process, but there's just less due process than there would be for someone who had been here longer or came in with a visa or until January was in the interior of the country.
Thank you. And my second question is broader for everybody. It's like, what can we do? How can we help?
Well, I'll stand up for the confirmer training. I think you stepped to the mic. Oh, you did say that. I'm so sorry. I just didn't want to be like a mic hog. I think the confirmer training is a really, really practical way for allies of, immigrant allies to participate, be active. Other than that, I always say, I really think that immigration ought to be a really pro small business, like pro what the Republican Party used to be issue. I think that if you're a Republican, you should be pro-immigrant, because what is more American than people coming here looking to make a better life for themselves, working hard, doing something, becoming productive members of society, creating small businesses, generating income, giving your children a better life. I just think that's the most American thing I can think of. So every time I get a chance to talk about it, I do. And so I also think that, I run into people all the time in my office who, there's this one immigrant that they really love and they really care about, and they really want that person to be able to stay. And they're like, this immigrant is different than all the other immigrants. Like, this person that I love, they're a really good person, and they really deserve to be able to stay here. But I'm opposed to all these other immigrants coming here. And I just think that at the end of the day, the only way to change minds is through that sort of like person-to-person contact. And so I just encourage people to talk about immigration, talk about your immigrant experiences. I have never been in this position myself, but I think these days it's probably very scary to stand up and say, let me tell you my immigration story. But maybe we can learn about people's lives, learn about people's stories, and get back to this idea that being an immigrant is actually very, very American. Our whole country is centered on the idea of immigration. So that's kind of where I try to help.
Also, the way we could help also is like if you do spot the ICE or anyone in the area, is also to take pictures. Take pictures. That way you have evidence. That way it's not a hearsay. It's very important. That way, like I was saying earlier, not people say this and that, and it's not true, so they're getting everybody else worked up, scared, they're all, freaking out because of ICE is on their way or whatever. And so yes, it's like what Flora was saying on Facebook. She said, make sure if you see anything, take pictures. That way it's always, we have proof of that. So that's always important. And I also did a training, our Project Protect food system, we did a training with the organization. And yes, so we're waiting on that so that we could help also with that rapid response.
I'll also say that we're going to spend the last few minutes giving you some really concrete actions that you can take in addition to joining an immigration protection team if you would like. And I wanted to give everyone that number for the reporting ICE activity hotline through Colorado Rapid Response Network. So it is 844-864-8341.
Hello, my name is Amanda. As you can see, I'm a little younger, and that's okay. I'm here to speak for the children of my next generation. That could either be my sons or daughters, or that can be my adopted sons or daughters, or just in general, the next generation. What I want to ask, once that person has been detained, how accurate is our system now to tracking their numbers and tracking exactly where they are? The detention centers themselves are not equivalent to a humane environment to where they need to live. A person like Marcelo Gomez from Massachusetts that was in the concentration camps for 7 days had nothing but a heated blanket with 7 other people to share with. Do you think that that environment will continue to process in an inhumane factor for the next generation so that they have to face consequences that they should have never faced? What I'm trying to ask is, do you believe that there is better hope for the better environment, especially when it comes to the detention centers for the people that are held up in that situation currently? And also, do you believe that our system is going to support us being able to find our missing people?
So, I don't really have a good answer for you. Immigration detention is supposed to be civil. It's not criminal. And yet, I would have a hard time identifying for you the difference between criminal detention and civil detention. The amount of time that I've been in the immigration detention center, I mean, there's, well, I feel really uncomfortable talking about it because I only went to visit, right? Like I went in and I left, but it feels similar or worse to me than a lot of our county jails maybe. Also, I think you talked a little bit about the kind of detention that happens prior to maybe when people aren't being initially processed by Border Patrol. I think some of those situations can be pretty brutal. I mean, we've heard stories of people being detained outside or in underpasses. I heard many years ago, I spoke at an ACLU event, and I heard another immigration attorney say that real immigration reform isn't going to happen until the Republican Party wants it. And the reason is because the Democrat Party kind of always wants immigration reform, but is always forced to kind of give something up in order to get reform. And so you really need the Republican Party to be pushing it, because once they want it, well, the Democrats will just sort of naturally go ahead. And so that's actually one of the reasons why I'm always talking about how immigration is actually a really Republicans should be pro-immigrant. But I don't think we're going to have an immigration reform until the Republican Party wants it. And just to be completely honest, I don't think we're going to get away from immigration detention until there's some kind of reform. Unfortunately, you know, George W. Bush was the last president to put forward kind of a big immigration plan. There was like a talk about like a guest worker program and so on. And obviously that completely went away after 9/11. And unfortunately, immigration has really become intertwined with this idea of terrorism, which is really untrue because I've met thousands of immigrants and I don't think I've ever met one that was involved in terrorism. But I guess I just struggle with your question because I guess I feel like I kind of struggle with the same issue every day. And I don't really understand why we demonize people who are looking for a better life for themselves and their children. And again, I just think that's very un-American, and I don't know why we do it.
Is there a detention center here in the Valley, and is there like an ICE office or centering here, or are any ICE officers coming from somewhere else? Those are my two questions, please.
I don't know where.
I'm not an expert on this, but there is a detention facility here in Alamosa near the airport, I believe, that is currently being remodeled. We are paying attention to that process, and certainly as an immigration protection team would want to be involved in supporting people who might be detained there. I know right now in Denver, there's a lot of activity around the Aurora Detention Center in particular from immigration protection teams with regular vigils. And for example, and this somewhat maybe speaks to your question, people standing outside of immigration courts to witness and hopefully prevent the ambushing of people who are there to go through their immigration process. As far as ICE agents, I'm not sure about that.
There is a Homeland Security officer.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm John Waters. I'm the editor of the Valley Courier. And my question is for Stephanie. Stephanie, earlier you talked about the threats to due process. Recently, the Deputy Chief of Staff in the White House, Stephen Miller, has suggested that habeas corpus is a privilege which could be suspended. Can you address how that might affect the immigrant community and the American population in general? Thank you.
So again, that's something under federal law, which I would not consider myself an expert in, but habeas corpus is essentially, it refers to the concept of like produce the body, right? So the government needs to tell you kind of where the person is and let you see them, talk to them, et cetera. When I heard him say that, I was appalled. I mean, I can't, you know, I don't want to be naive, but I cannot believe that we would seriously consider suspending habeas corpus in this country. It seems to me like a bedrock concept of due process. Habeas, it was a habeas action that stopped the Egyptian family from being deported. The federal judge demanded that they, you know, that they produce the body essentially. I would be very scared for the future of our country. I've kind of reached the point where I'm not going to say anymore, oh, this will never happen, because many things have happened in the last 4 months that I thought would never happen. But I would certainly hope that we as a country would rise up and object to any kind of reduction or suspension of habeas corpus. I just think that would be a serious sign that our country is in trouble.
My name is David Lendertz. I'm a retired physician, practice in Alamosa, La Jada, Eads, Colorado, out in the east. I think it's a time for moral clarity on the part of all of us in this nation, especially moral clarity on the part of our public officials, to not be silent, to state what is true, what is obvious, what is just. And as long as these things are being allowed to go on, the horrors that are presented to us every day by the psychotic monster who is the president, and he is psychotic, then this will be perpetrated upon all of us. We'll continue to have these meetings. We'll continue to see people being abused. So it's time for everyone, especially our elected officials, to act in the role that they were elected to do and speak up on a moral basis.
I have two questions. One I hope is easy to answer. What good is taking a picture going to do when I look in the news and I don't see any IDs? I mean, there are names on military people's uniforms, but I haven't seen, so what good is a picture? I mean, they're going in with sunglasses and, you know, camouflage. How is a picture gonna help? Okay, and my second one is the process seems to be, go ahead and take it to court, we'll delay and delay and delay while we continue to do whatever we want. And as this continues, how hard or easy or possible will it be to reverse these things that are already in place?
So I think the purpose of the picture is to help confirmers come along later and identify maybe the vehicles or the clothes that the officers were wearing. I've seen several reports where maybe people thought it was ICE, but it was actually a local law enforcement action or something like that. And I mean, so I think that's the purpose of the pictures. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the goal. The other question is such a huge, such a huge struggle. I think, and I didn't necessarily mean to get so like political, but I think during the first Trump administration, I think what we as a nation learned is that there's laws, but then there's norms, right? And so like we always assumed that our elected officials would act a certain way because these were the norms that we'd been raised with. And what we learned is that there's a lot of stuff that's difficult to enforce in the courts, but it's outside the norm, but it's difficult to enforce. So the entire first 4 years of the Trump administration were pushing those norms. And I think once something is big, it's very difficult to get it back to small. I think we're kind of stuck with, one thing that's less political, but I'll go ahead and talk about it is, Obama did DACA for, people that had been in this country since they were very young. And he did it through executive action. And he included this long justification about Congress wouldn't act and like a long reason for why he needed to exercise his executive power in that way. Well, once we moved on to the next administration, they built on everything that he did about sort of expanding executive power, and now expanded executive power in different areas, right? But still kind of the same essential argument. And now I believe the Biden administration also, adopted those same arguments, and now we're, Trump, the second administration, same arguments. So I don't know what the answer is for our country, but I think it is almost impossible to put the genie back in the bottle here.
We only have 10 minutes left, so we're going to have to move on to our fundraiser and actions that you can take. I want to thank you all so much for your questions and comments. I want to thank Liza and our panelists. If we could give them another round of applause. And please stick around to the end so that you know some things you can do and hopefully can participate in our fundraiser. So in these final minutes, I want to talk about the San Luis Valley Immigrant Resource Center, who we're benefiting today. Unfortunately, the staff is very busy and they weren't able to join us. I do believe we have some board members here, though. And they did provide to me a statement about their services. So just to let you know, for those who are here in person, your programs have a pledge form on the back. We're going to pass around donation baskets now and some pens. And you can either place cash or a check in the donation basket, or there's a QR code, or you can go to slvirc.org/donate to make a donation online. Ideally, if possible, if you're able to, you would make a monthly donation. SLVRC really needs our help right now, but a one-time donation is also welcome. So just so you know, after hearing kind of the situation we're in now, what this organization provides in the San Luis Valley. The San Luis Valley Immigrant Resource Center provides direct services to over 2,000 individuals per year, most of which are Spanish or Canjabal speaking, indigent, and would otherwise not have access to services. SLV-IRC is recognized and accredited as an immigration service provider through the Department of Justice. And currently, there are 2 accredited representatives on staff. 3 staff members are bilingual in English and Spanish, and 1 staff member is trilingual in the Mayan language. I'm not sure I pronounce it correctly, I apologize, Canjabal as well. And the staff strive to educate and empower immigrants through advocacy, education, and immigration legal assistance through 3 programs. Their first program is the Immigration Legal Assistance Program, which provides immigration legal advice and consultations, prepares family petitions, DACA renewals, citizenship applications, work permit renewals, and legal permanent residence cards, does consular processing, affidavit of support, and 601A waivers, translates and notarizes documents, and assists undocumented immigrants in applying for individual taxpayer identification numbers. Their second important program is Por Ti Misma, which is assisting battered immigrants program and provides immigration legal assistance and advocacy to crime victims who qualify under the Violence Against Women Act and U-Visa, and provides emergency housing, food, and utility assistance to crime victims. This program also assists in relocating crime victims who are fleeing from a domestic violence situation. And finally, Punto de Vista Education Outreach Program provides English as a second language instruction for adults wishing to learn a second language, provides civics instruction for individuals applying for naturalization, to prepare for the USCIS interview, provides outreach and education to the community to inform on current immigration law changes, immigrant rights, etc., provides after-school tutoring to approximately 15 children to assist in completing their schoolwork during the school year, assists immigrants in studying and preparing for the Colorado driver's license, and assists immigrants in applying or renewing Colorado driver's licenses. So as you've just heard, these services are crucial and really only available in the Valley through SLV-IRC. They really need our support. Please consider donating today or going online. And we would love to just track your pledges, so you don't have to include your name on the pledge form, but if you would write the amount you pledged, we'd appreciate that. And finally, as everyone's waiting for, we didn't want to let you go without some actions you can take, so I have some top suggestions for you. Number one is to join an immigration protection team, which are throughout the state. If you are in Saguache County, I'm the team lead, and you can contact me directly at scipt@proton.me. And otherwise, for other parts of Colorado, Gina McAfee is the Colorado IPT statewide coordinator, and she is at gina.mcafee6@gmail.com.
Can you repeat those?
Yes. So for me, it's scipt@proton.me. And for Gina, it's gina.mcafee6@gmail.com. And we also have some flyers up front for the local IPT. Our second suggestion today is there was a recent congressional letter to Secretary Noem and Acting ICE Director Lyons expressing concern over the disturbing pattern of ICE operations taking place at immigration courts across the country, including in Denver. 86 Congresspeople cited Congress's constitutional obligation to conduct oversight of the DHS and demanded written responses to a number of questions by June 19th. Representative DeGette of Denver was the only Colorado congressperson to sign the letter. We are asking you to reach out to your U.S. House member and ask them why they didn't sign, express your concerns, and ask what they will do to protect immigrants in their district. We also encourage you to contact Senators Hickenlooper and Bennett to speak about this issue. I don't know the name of it. It's a congressional letter to Secretary Noem and to the acting ICE director. And Gina McAfee, who I mentioned earlier with Colorado IPT, or I also have access to a copy of the letter if you want to reach out to either one of us. Our third suggested action is that it has been reported that Governor Jared Polis ordered the Colorado Labor Department to turn over personal information after an ICE subpoena. We are asking that you contact Governor Polis regarding this betrayal of our immigrant neighbors, as well as Attorney General Weiser to ask him to initiate an inquiry into whether state laws were broken. Next, you can join a No Kings protest next Saturday on July 14th. They are all over the country, all over the state. There's one here in Alamosa, I believe at noon. We have flyers at the back about that. And there are also some little slips at that back table with a few additional actions that you can take. So please do stop on your way out and check those out. So that concludes our town hall. I thank you all so much for being here today and for your care, your action, and for standing up for our immigrant neighbors. Thank you so much.